Today, we're going to sit down and discuss a little bit of a different side of logistics than most of you are used to. We're going to talk about the world of companies in dispatch as opposed to freight brokerage in general.
Welcome to the HPLS podcast. Live, relevant, and high performance information, conversations, and education weekly.
Hey everybody, welcome back to another episode of Sales Chatter. Today I got with me Jorie Myers, good friend of mine that's coming in. Jorie is out of the Georgia area, has a logistics dispatch company, and we're going to talk a little bit about dispatch sales and how it differs from logistics sales. Jorie, welcome, buddy. It's so good to have you here again, my man.
Oh, thank you, brother. Happy New Year, 2024. I am very blessed to be here, brother. And again, thank you for extending the invitation.
Oh man, thank you. I'm blessed to have you. You know, it's amazing. You know, just a few years ago when we first met, I had no idea about this idea of dispatch companies. You know, actually just opening a company to dispatch for smaller carriers, maybe dispatch. So. And I know things have probably over the last couple of years changed, shifted. There's been some new laws, some new regulations. Why don't you start by I'm sure most people have heard of dispatch companies. You know, you can see it all over Facebook, all over Instagram, especially, you know, with your club inside Clubhouse, with your show inside Clubhouse. But just explain to the audience a little bit about what a dispatch company does, and we'll get into kind of how it differs, but more importantly, kind of what's changed in the last year, and how you've had to adopt to that.
Oh yeah, well again, thank you for having me on. And for individuals who have not been exposed to dispatch companies, the independent dispatch agencies, I would say that, truth be told, the duties and the services are endless. So it really just depends on the individual shop, but at a baseline foundational level, a dispatch company is going to be the business development arm of small fleets. So that's going to be those individuals who already have pre-existing relationships with brokers and other 3PLs, maybe even freight forwarders, and are leveraging those relationships to get optimal freight opportunities for these individual fleet owners or owner operators. And the benefit is, of course, drivers do what they do, they drive. And we want to make sure that those individuals can stay in that space where they thrive, and they can outsource the business development, the load booking, the paperwork, the invoicing. Like I said, it's endless what a dispatch company can do and the benefits they can bring. But those are the baselines, and yeah, the FMCSA over the past year and a half have come to some regulations. I wouldn't say regulations, they put some very, very strong suggestions and stipulated that if you don't adhere, that there might be a fine associated with stepping out of bounds, and that just goes to, you know, more so making sure that the individual dispatch agencies are all sticking to a same level of quality, and not doing what some would consider illegal brokerage activities. So they put a slew of, you know, areas where you would need a brokerage authority if you were to do certain activities, and if you were to be, you know, if you were to do something that did fall into those lines and you didn't have that, it's a $10,000 minimum per occurrence. So the point is, you know, do what you need to do as an independent dispatch agency to stay in adherence. So the biggest thing, well, let me just say, in my shop, the biggest thing that has been affected by those regulations would be me having a freight source. Let's just say, like I said, you're leveraging relationships that you've been able to acquire through doing business here and there. So if you understand that you have a freight source and they ship predominantly out of one area, well, years past, a strategy for a dispatch service would be to build a carrier base around that shipper where they're doing all the shipping. You're going through a brokerage, so you're not going directly to a shipper, which is also one of those stipulations. A dispatch company cannot go directly to a shipper and bring their carrier there. There has to be some interface with the broker in between there. But, even if you're doing that and you're building your carrier base around a particular shipping location, the biggest thing that I had to adapt to was the fact that if you are considered allocating freight, so if as a dispatcher, I'm the one that's saying, hey, I'm going to give it to this carrier because I know that they're really good and they're top tier. They're going to do a great job versus me having the option to give it to another carrier that does the exact same lane in the same area. That portion right there is not sanctioned. So that's been the biggest thing that has changed in my operation is, well, now you have to say, what's the largest fleet that I can dispatch in a hot area where I have a lot of freight versus who necessarily can be the best carrier in that area. Does that make sense to you?
That does. And so my first question to that is, so in essence, prior to these new FMCSA strong suggestions, we'll call them, you didn't actually have to have a brokerage license, because I could see the interface between you and a 3PL, a 4PL. You leverage relationships. They know you have, in essence, you become their supplier because you have the contacts for the trucks. So they say, hey, Jorie, I got this freight. I got these 5 loads. Does it match any of your trucks? You have a direct connection to either the trucks or finding out where they are. Yes, I'll take these 2 loads. You would do the invoicing on behalf of the carrier. So you actually become the third party intermediary. So there's and correct me if I'm wrong, but for lack of a better term, it almost as if it's double brokered, right? Because you're taking it from a broker and then you're actually giving it to a truck and you're making a percentage, right? Kinda?
I'm going to be the one to correct you where you're
Go for it.
Just a little mistaken. So now, could that be the case? Yes. Now, if we're talking about legitimate dispatch agencies, no, it doesn't have to be a double brokerage opportunity, because what you're supposed to do as an independent dispatch agency is get paid from the carrier on the backside. Now, if you're positioning yourself as a dispatch agency to be the one receiving the funds from the shipper or the broker, well, you're off. And that's a fine. You're going to get fined for that.
Okay.
That's
what I was trying to get at. Yep.
Right. So, no, but when a dispatch company is operating legitimately, depends on how they charge the carrier. It can be a flat fee for the week. It could be a percentage of each load or a flat fee per load. It just depends, but that money is supposed to come from the carrier directly after the fact. But you did mention something else where even though I'm not the one that's getting paid directly, I could be the one that's submitting all the paperwork. So the rate confirmation, the POD, any lumper receipts, any scale tickets, all that kind of stuff. I could be the one that's in control of submitting that to the factoring company or directly to the brokerage. So that would be considered me invoicing on behalf of that carrier. But again, the funds that the compensation for the dispatcher services are to come directly from that individual fleet that they're dispatching for at that time.
Got it. So, and I guess that's where the FMCSA was saying, okay, we got to put rules and regulations in so this continues to happen, because if you invoice the customer and pay the carrier, then you're acting as if you're a third party, right? For lack of a better
I guess
term.
so. Say that one more time just to make sure I heard that. I'm thinking about this from like a step back, right? Because I'm not in the dispatch world. So if I have ignorance here, I really apologize.
but I'm looking at it and I'm saying, from somebody looking outside, looking in, right? Complaining about dispatch companies, for example, right? That these, and I've seen quite a few posts where it's like these dispatch companies, they're saying they're not brokers, but they are brokers because they're making a commission on it and and they're trying. What I see is people trying to group dispatch companies in this ball that I don't think they should be grouped in. And the reason why I wanted to clarify this with you is because I'm hearing a lot, and a lot of people are hearing a lot about, well, it's pretty much considered double brokering. But the way you just explained it, it's not. You're providing a service to a smaller fleet that doesn't have either the bandwidth, the funds to employ a sales team to go out and build these relationships. So you're in essence becoming like a fractional sales team, for lack of a better term. So when I say fractional, I look at it like,
that's exactly
you
what
can
I was
hire
saying.
a marketing company to do 10 hours a week. It's a fractional marketing company, right? Like you're not hiring a marketing person in your company. You can do it with, people do it with editors all the time for social stuff. I'll send you 3 videos a week. So it's a fractional editor. And that's what I mean by the word fractional. So, you're in essence becoming the sales force, utilizing your contacts, your relationships to get people freight, and then the carrier's paying you for that.
Correct. Can you hear me? Okay.
Yep, 100%. Yep. So, I mean, there's no
Okay.
double brokerage to it. I could see how people that are uneducated with it can see it as double brokerage, but I believe when you're, which kind of see why the FMCSA would start putting these guidelines in, because at what point do you regulate it, right? So, has that significantly changed the dispatch business as a concept world? Or is it pretty much standard? It's just kind of like, hey guys, now there's an official line in the sand that we can't cross.
Well, I would say that regulations in this area are necessary because there were some outlaws trying to operate in the wild, wild west when it comes to dispatch companies. So all of the negative things that you've probably heard and discussed, to a certain extent, it's from some truth.
Yes.
Some organizations were doing some things that really made dispatch companies look bad. But if we're looking at the historical perspective, freight brokers weren't always the best thing either. The industry didn't look at freight brokers favorably for a very long time, and then the actual regulations came and people started to have to adhere to certain things, certain standards, certain thresholds, and from there we all learned how to get along. So I think it's the same thing with the dispatch world, and when it comes down to it, there are some things that have changed that could say it stifles what a dispatch company was able to do prior to the regulations. But again, if you are in the business for the right reasons, not just to make a quick buck, the regulations help you because they are going to separate what you're doing from the bad actors, and that's ultimately who we want to push out of the industry. You don't want to be associated with people who are doing things negatively. And, I guess furthermore to the double brokering situation, a lot of times, that's just part of the process, the steps of what happens during double brokering. There is the company that is putting on a facade so that they can actually get the freight, and then they're going through other channels to redirect who's actually going to be doing what, who's going to be moving the freight, who's going to be picking it up, who's going to be delivering. And, so it's a whole bunch of stuff that could be grouped in as to how a dispatch service could get roped into just being a part of that, that process. But as a whole,
I remember
think,
when I
I think the
first
industry
started.
is moving to a good spot.
Yeah, I remember when I even first started. I used to work with companies like Mark 7, a lot of these U.S. brokers. I was a Canadian. I was in a brokerage company, and they would give me a ton of their business. The Retrans of the world, the Mark 7s of the world. A lot of them would give me their business because they didn't understand how to move Canadian cross-border business. They didn't understand the customs paperwork and all that kind of stuff. And so this whole idea of double brokering, I think, has been around, it's been around forever. I think it's when people started scamming where it really became an issue, because I had great relationships with large 4PLs in the US that just didn't understand customs, didn't understand the Canadian market, didn't understand, like North American Van Lines, for example, major corporation in the US. I used to do a ton of business for them in Canada, intra-Canada, and cross-border, because they were just like, Dan, I don't get it. Like, every time I go to do something, it's such a pain in the arse to get across the border. And it was just because they didn't cross the T or dot an I on paperwork, but which we understood. So there was, I think, you can develop these strong relationships, which are actually legally considered double brokering, but it's everybody's in it for the end result to serve the customer and make sure things go well, and they're in it for the long run. It's when you're not. And I can see that with dispatch companies, because they just started popping up, right? Like, it wasn't even a thought until somebody said, hey, why don't we do this? It'd be and it's a great business model. But then you're right. You have the wild, wild west people that are like, hey, man, we can maximize this, and like, we can capitalize on this before the markets even see what's happening. Does that make sense?
Right. Yeah. And I think that the point, to boil down what you just said, is about transparency. A lot of people leverage other entities' networks to get freight moved, but the whole point is people know about it. You're transparent about it. And I feel like the heat that dispatch companies probably were getting was that they weren't making it known that they were dispatch companies calling on behalf of a carrier, where that is now another part of the regulations, the guidelines, is that a dispatch agency must tell the freight broker who they're trying to solicit freight from that, this is my role in this transaction. I'm working on behalf of this this carrier, but know that I'm an intermediary. I'm authorized to do all these things. But in the past, it just was a conversation of, hey, I got this truck here. What's up? And then when something happened, when the freight couldn't get picked up, or if there was an issue, an accident or something that now is being disclosed that, well, I'm not technically part of the company, I just did this, is where, that responsibility, and just like how individuals able to remove themselves from the process probably rubbed a lot of people the wrong way. So again, the regulations are to protect the broker so that at least they have the knowledge of what the situation is. So if something does happen, they're able to respond quicker to their customer and give them the real rundown, not just what somebody is saying who's not necessarily affected in the same way by whatever is going on. So like I said, the regulations are necessary. So I'm grateful for regulations and guidelines and things that can separate bad actors from people who are legitimately doing business the right way.
Yeah, and legitimately trying to build a business in a market that needs the service you're offering. Right? It makes sense. It makes total sense. There's so many companies out there now looking for, a sales force, looking for somebody to generate revenue for them while they do, you said it at the beginning of the podcast, while they do what they do best, while they drive, while they run their companies, while they dispatch their trucks, while they, there's so many different levels to a corporation in order to make it healthy, wealthy, and successful. And sometimes you just got to sometimes you just got to get somebody else involved that's spent years building the relationships that you don't have time to build because you just want to be busy. You want to make money. You want to do what you do best. What actually got you? I'd love for you to share with the audience. What got you into the world of dispatch?
I was doing it for a corporation already. So I was working for an industrial supplier that had about 700 trucks. And the trucks were mainly there to support their own internal business, about 17 hubs, 2,200 brick and mortar branches across the United States. So all these vehicles and all these things were already supporting the foundational business of the industrial supplier, but it just so happened that there was a department within the organization that focused on external. And I was part of that. I grew that business. And COVID hit, and I didn't realize this until after I opened my own company and had my own experience with other owner operators. But the drivers that got fired when COVID hit, the most professional drivers I still dealt with today, till this day. So it's just like I had great experiences with drivers, and I hate to see that because we didn't know what was going to happen with COVID that they got fired. And I was in a position where I didn't want to get fired because I was the head person dispatching them. So I wanted to leverage the information, the skills, the abilities that I had developed over the previous couple years. And I found out that people were dispatching independently as an entrepreneur, like an endeavor to make money externally from a corporation. And it seemed like the right thing to do, especially with trucking blowing up the way that it did. So I had the existing knowledge, I had the trials and tribulations and the ability to learn from a huge fleet, a great, manager and all that kind of good stuff that had lots of experience. So it was just me being able to transition to do something on my own to, take control of my own situation. So that's how I got into it, which is also how I started creating content within the transportation and logistics space. So that's how I got into dispatching myself.
Beautiful. I'd like to address something, and I'd love your take on it, because I personally think this is like the pinnacle. This is the nucleus of what we're experiencing today, right? Today, I believe more and more than I have in any other year that you have to be something other than a salesperson. And that is, I believe, where content really comes into play. Sharing your knowledge, sharing your passion, sharing what you can help people with, customers with, in a content-driven way. So when the customer, prospect, whatever you want to call it, let's call it prospect, because we'll talk about sales, right? When they're looking you up, they see that you're something other than a salesperson. They see that you're trying to help your industry be better, do more, achieve more. How do you think about content, and what made you realize that content is king when it comes to your business and kind of getting your name, your personal brand out there in logistics?
Well, you hit it today. I would say within I'll limit it to logistics, but I don't have to. Within any industry, specifically, especially in logistics supply chain, when you are a service provider, you want to be able to provide as many services as possible. Even if you're not the person that's gonna, you haven't mastered that, you at least want to be able to suggest somebody who can handle that on behalf of that customer that you're courting or you're already in business with. You want to be able to be a solution provider. And content has enabled me to do just that. I've built so many relationships with people who service peripherally all the things that happen with trucking or moving freight. So the individuals who I've been able to build very, very deep relationships with, in some capacity, they support the transportation of freight from A to Z. And with that comes the ability to be able to easily, reach into my network and say, hey, well, if you're having this issue over here, I know this person, and they'll be great to, provide you a solution right here. So in the whole context of building your network before you need them, I would say that being someone who's creating content and constantly reaching out to other professionals in the industry, it gives me that lane to develop those relationships. And that's a God-given ability to be able to, talk to somebody new and, find common ground and talk to them like a human, have that human to human experience and be able to build from there. So content creation has also allowed me to strengthen that portion of myself. And again, when it comes to providing solutions, you wanna make sure that when you are talking about these different subjects, that people know that you're well versed. You know the industry, you know the news that's going on. You're just in it. You're plugged. You're not just some fly by night, person just trying to make a quick buck. You show through your body of work that you're really in this, and people can respect that. So that's what content creation has done for me. That's why I think it's king, because your body of work allows you to speak. It speaks for you before you even have to say anything.
I agree. I also think in this day and age, and love your opinion on this, one of my big things in this day and age is, get a website with your name.com and just share with people what you believe in. I truly believe that everybody has a voice, no matter who you are. There's somebody out there that needs to hear what you have to say. I really believe that. And I think as a salesperson, again, going back to that, showing you're not just a salesperson, right? Like there's more depth to you. There's more, and I'm not talking about like posting, Instagram shorts or reels on, you at a club. I'm talking about like, what do you believe in? What's your true authentic self? Because, I think the distance between who we are at work and who we are as individuals is becoming narrower and narrower. Like when we were kids, I remember my dad saying, well, when I'm on stage, I'm this person. And when I'm off stage, I'm this person. And I have to be on stage because that's the persona. And, you see so many people that are one way at work and in another way at home. And they know they are. Like, there's a lot of people like, well, I got to put on this face when I'm at work. And, even when I was training a ton of salespeople, I would say, like, listen, the only thing you got to put on when you come to work is a bulletproof vest to let the rejection bounce off you. Like, that's it. You be who you are. Because the thing that I say is, if you're not who you are, like if you're one way looking into this camera and on this podcast, and you're a completely other way when you're on the phone with people, if they look you up and see your content and then have a conversation with you, it's a major disconnect in who they see you as a person, right? So, and I think with anything, it's kind of like companies say, when you go from this page to this page, like you're on my website and you go to my Calendly link, there's got to be familiarity, or else the person's like, well, where am I here? Hold on. It's like an instant stop. Like, hold on, they're the same colors. It's not the same branding. There's not the same logo. What is this? Like, why am I here? So it's to me, I see it as one of those things. Do you see it kind of down that path as well? Would you agree with that?
Definitely, I would. I mean, there's something about being able to show up as your authentic self that really, it just does it for you, and it does it for me. And I can take this. I'm actually going to take this two different ways.
Yep.
So in the African American culture, there's this thing called code switching, where you are at home, how you're talking at home, and around your friends, your peers, is not necessarily accepted in the corporate environment. So that's just a known fact. So I'm taking it there first to say that that's something that a lot of people have to deal with on a daily basis, and it becomes tiring. It becomes very exhausting. And then taking it to the next level of, I can remember myself in corporate environments that were extremely stuffy, things that just so heavy of having to manage all of the environmental factors and the way in which social politics play out. And I'm not going to lie to you, man, it was a breath of fresh air to get back into logistics, because it's so much freer. Like, I can show up as my authentic self in this area very easily because I'm talking to so many different people, and people of all backgrounds who are just real, very transparent, because they can do their job at the top of their ability and still be themselves. So it's just a place where I'm grateful to be able to show up. And I found at this particular point in my life, I've been in the industry. I got my start in transportation and logistics in 2013, but I've been in it since 2018. So it's definitely home for me, and being able to show up as yourself, to be able to bridge that gap or shorten that gap between who you are at home and in the workplace. I think I have seen that, especially leveraging LinkedIn. It's a lot more personal posts versus it being like a very rigid, this is professional and I'm going to use it strictly professional. And over here, LinkedIn or, Instagram or Facebook, I'm talking about family over there. I've seen that shorten, and I like it. I like it a lot.
That's great. Thank you so much for being here, brother. I hope all of you out there watching and listening took something from what Jorie's talking about. Every single industry comes into rules and regulations every year, and things change. Like we look at all the ELD mandates, all the hours of service mandates, all the things that happen in trucking. Jorie, congratulations, brother. I'm so happy that we reconnected and we're talking again. It was great having you on, my friend. Any closing remarks or anything you want to share with anybody?
I would say that everything that you want, everything that I want, is on the other side of being grateful what you already have and establishing the discipline to get to the next level. So those are the two principles that my family is focusing on in 2024, and I pray that that right there can bring you some accomplishments and everything else that you're seeking in this world.
Welcome to the HPLS podcast. Live, relevant, and high performance information, conversations, and education weekly.